Hi, it's Danielle and Rob here from the BCO podcast, and we are just really enjoying the fact that we might be able to see some stars right now. We've got a bit of nice weather after a lot of rain, and so we were thinking, let's go out and see if we can spot some things in the night sky. And I'm in a place where I can't see too much considering I'm pretty close to Cork City. And so there's a bit of light pollution here, so I'm kind of limited with what we can see in the night sky. But you're in a much nicer location in terms of stargazing.
Yeah, up here in County Clare, where my partner's parents are, it's much nicer. The neck of the woods we're in, there's not a ton of light pollution, so we can get out to some pretty dark skies. But the problem we have at the moment is that it just doesn't get dark until like stupid o'clock in the morning. And I didn't realize for how long that went on. I just assumed like come 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll be fine. But like, it never really seems to get dark like it does in the winter. Like how long is that window? Like you know more about the actual window of opportunity in the summer than I do. But like, is there any decent chunk of the summer sky that's worth looking at?
Do you know what? I don't know if you saw, there was a viral video going around recently of a girl, and she was American and she was in Ireland for the first time. And I saw the video and I thought she was in Dublin, but she was actually in Cork, and she was walking down the road and she was filming up at the sky and it was blue. And she's like, "Do you want to know what time it is right now? It's 9 o'clock at night. This is not during the day. I know it looks like noon." And it's funny because I've gotten used to it, but it was something that when I first moved to Europe, I was like, summers are fantastic. Like, it's great because we're, especially here in Ireland, we're so far north that it's not great for astronomy. It's great for like hanging out and enjoying the summer weather. For astro, it's a bit difficult because here we actually don't technically reach astronomical twilight during the peak of the summer solstice. And so it's really tough to actually do any sort of astronomy. So people actually ask a lot, how do you do astronomy in Ireland? And this doesn't seem like the best location and things. Well, the flip side of having very little darkness in the summer is that we have a lot of darkness in the wintertime. So we kind of use summertime as this is the time to do some work on the dome or work on if we've got new software or new equipment or anything. We kind of do all of that kind of tweaking and stuff during the summer months to kind of get ready for autumn and into the winter. So it's a bit tough because it's great in terms of lighting because we don't have that much light during the winters. We have more dark skies, more time to look at the stars, but then the weather isn't as great. So we have a bit, it's a weird sort of thing. You have to kind of get the sweet spot right, because in the summer we have better weather, well, sometimes, but then we don't have as much darkness. So it is a good time to get out and see a few things if you are a night owl, and if you don't mind staying out late. The summer nights, at least you don't have to be bundled up. That's a bonus, because in the wintertime, I am in layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of socks and boots and mittens and hats and scarves and everything you can possibly think of, because it's late at night and it's cold. But in the summertime, you can at least take advantage of the nicer temperatures. So have you been able, I mean, in Cork, it's been real rainy, and I know around the country it's been real rainy this summer in particular. But have you gotten any better weather up where you are?
Not really. We're right on the coast, so it's really exposed. So even if we do get a clear night, it's windy as all hell. So it's not good fun to be standing out in the middle of the night getting absolutely belted by the rain. But tonight is actually looking promising, so I might get a chance for the next couple of days now. But the question I wanted to ask you, actually, because I've always been curious, because I've used my own telescope in the past and like looked at a light polluted sky, and then all of a sudden I can see stars that I couldn't see with the naked eye, is like, to what extent can a telescope compensate? Because I often get people saying, why have you guys got an observatory that close to the city? Surely you can't see anything. But I know that the telescope compensates to an extent for like the light pollution that we would experience with the naked eye.
It is something that we still battle with, having the telescope close to the city, because I guess the rule of, it's not really rule of thumb, there's kind of a list of things that you would want to have for a telescope and for an observatory, and in the best case scenario, which would be dark skies, one, clear skies, the other, so good weather, Hopefully dry. It would be better. Not windy, because windy makes a really excited atmosphere. So you want something kind of calm, dry, dark, and you want to eliminate as much atmosphere as possible. So high up. So for the peak conditions for astronomy, you're kind of looking at the tops of volcanoes and mountains and things, and closer to deserts and places like that. And we are literally the opposite of every place you want to be. We are close to a city. We are at sea level. So unless we built an observatory underground, like, we actually couldn't get any worse. And then because we're next to the river, we've got a lot of moisture, so we're not dry. And we're in Cork, so it's windy all the time. So it is difficult, to say the least. And it'll break your heart. You have to be a certain type of crazy, I think, to go into astronomy in this kind of condition. But luckily, I work with a group of people that are just as crazy as me, and they love it enough that they have an observatory set up here. The benefits, and one of the reasons that we are at the castle, is that it is access to the city. So that means that people don't have to go really far out to get to us. So when you're talking about like getting up to like Tay, for example, if you go down to the Canary Islands and you go to the telescopes down there, it's at the top of a volcano, or I don't think it's an active volcano anymore. But same thing, like the ones in Hawaii, they're above the cloud line. If you go down to the Atacama Desert, same thing. Not easy to get to for the European Southern Observatory telescopes like ALMA and things. Those are no joke. Like, you have to actually acclimatize, and you have to go to like a certain level, and then you put on oxygen masks to go farther up. So luckily, with our observatory, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. So there are some benefits with being not so high up and not far away from the city. But yeah, we do have to deal with the light pollution. Luckily, it's not... Cork's a big-ish city, but it's not like being near Tokyo or being near New York City or Paris or London or something like that. So, or even Dublin for that matter. We're not as light polluted as that. So it's not awful. And the guys at the observatory, which I'm not going to go into too much detail because we can do that another time in a different discussion, but they have developed techniques to kind of combat the conditions and things at the observatory, so that they were able to do really impressive work there. And the telescope can definitely still pick up things that the naked eye wouldn't see, for sure. Yeah, we are limited. I know we talked before about having a scale for how bright an object is in the night sky. And so we have the same kind of scale for how much light pollution is in the night sky. So we have a Bortle scale, and that'll tell you how many stars you can see in the night sky. And so here in where we are, we're around 5 or 6 Bortle. I'm not saying that correctly.
Sounds like a Pokemon.
I know.
I choose you, Bortle.
Yeah, Bortle 5, Bortle 6 skies here. So we still get a lot of stars in the night sky.
Sorry, is that an inverse scale? Is that like 1 good and 6 bad, or other way around?
Yeah, so we have, if you get to a Bortle 2 or a Bortle 1 sky, you are seeing stars, really good stars. And usually, like, I have friends that live near a Bortle 2, and they're in the deserts of New Mexico. So, like, nothing around. And I don't think I've ever even seen that level before. And the way my friends describe it is that it'll take your breath away the first time you see something like that. Because you're really you're seeing a lot more with the naked eye than what you would see anywhere close to being in the city. So this is something that we're going to have to deal with going forward, because we are growing, the cities are growing, they're expanding. A lot of old observatories that were built outside of city limits as cities have expanded are now in the city bounds. So these observatories are going to have to deal with light pollution as cities are growing. We're having more light installations, and we're just going to have more light at night. And it is something that is a little bit heartbreaking when you think about it, because for me, I think people living in cities, if they don't have a chance, not everybody gets to go out to the countryside. I was lucky growing up that I was able to have a place in away from the city, and we had a cabin I could go to at the weekends, and I got to see a star-filled sky. But if you only grow up in the city, if you only are in like somewhere like New York City and you don't go out to the countryside, you have no idea what you're even missing. And that is really heartbreaking to me, because how can you be inspired by stars if you can't even see a star?
Mm. Although, I mean, it is a little encouraging that, as you say, like cities are expanding and everything, but that means that, the work isn't done yet. Like the lights that they have yet to install can be augmented and made, to align with best practices. Now, we won't go into all that because I'm sure we'll be able to get our friends from Dark Sky Ireland on in a future episode to go into detail about like what we can do. But like it seems like a really, really good opportunity for us to like identify that there is stuff we can do to fix light pollution and minimize the impact going forward. I mean, retroactively fixing existing light pollution is one problem, but minimizing the damage we do going forward is a whole other one. And I know there's other threats to astronomy, like actually up in the sky with like the satellites streaking through your image and stuff, but I guess light pollution is just the problem that we want to overcome, and not just for astronomy, but I mean, like how tough is it at the castle? I mean, like, are there additional measures you guys have to take on particular nights? Like, is it getting harder in the few years that you've been there?
A little bit. I've noticed that across the way from us, across the river, I don't remember the lights being as bright. Just recently we're up there, and I said to the guys, I was like, they must have changed the bulbs there because they're blinding. And then there's I think it's a GAA pitch down the way from us that they put in new lights as well, and they're higher up. Now those aren't on all the time, but the ones across from us, they're on the docklands. They're on all the time at night. So there's not a ton that we can do other just on a day-to-day go, and unless we go into like the council and be like, tell them to take their lights down. Do you know what I mean? So for us, that's where the dome comes in handy, trying to keep it as dark inside of the observatory as we can. But yeah, it is a problem that we're just gonna have to deal with going forward. Luckily, we're not looking at super faint objects. So in terms of the majority of things that we're looking at, it's not gonna bother us as much.
It's frustrating that you guys are dealing with that, but also I'm seeing so many advances and like good news stories coming out of the dark sky community with like winds and like towns converting to like being dark sky places and all that, that I'm genuinely hopeful that the problem and the solution are kind of meeting each other at this perfect moment. And I think part of that is like letting people realize that it's just a win-win to address this across the board. Like it helps on, it's not just astronomers that are going to benefit. I mean, the electricity consumption is one of the primary reasons why we're moving towards these super efficient LEDs, but they're also blinding. So there is a slight trade-off that we have to factor in. It isn't just one aspect of the problem that you have to address, because it can actually make things worse in other regards. And one of the ways that it's making things worse is by disrupting circadian rhythms. So like there are diseases associated with disrupted sleeping, and I know we've all done that stupid thing where you're on your phone, scrolling through whatever app it is until you're about to go to sleep, and then you put your phone down and you're just wired because your eyes need darkness to trigger the hormone melatonin being released so that you fall asleep. And like that's something that if we don't tackle light pollution, you're basically doing that on a very, very large scale. You're just flooding an entire community with unnatural light. What I love about this, I only just discovered today, is that the acronym that they use for artificial light at night is ALAN. And ALAN is our manager at Blackrock Castle Observatory, and I was reading a study about how ALAN was disrupting the mating strategies of corals. So I got a good kick out of that. I'm like, God, Alan is going to be the one that wipes out the barrier reef if we're not careful. He seems so unimposing a guy. He seems so nice.
Send that headline on to the group chat. That's really good. So, is there wildlife here in Ireland specifically that's affected by? I know you mentioned the coral reef, but we don't have the coral reef in Ireland. Is there something specific here?
Well, we have coral in Ireland. It's like it looks more like limestone, and we have like beautiful coral, but it's just not as abundantly colorful as the ones that you're familiar with in like the Great Barrier Reef. But we do have coral systems, and we have fish that rely on them and everything. So there's coral pretty much everywhere, but it's threatened everywhere. And what's really cool about it is that it's reliant on lunar cycles for its reproductive strategy. So the fun thing about being a human being is that if a guy and someone else want to get together and have a baby, they have to physically come together, make the decision, and they can do it because they can come to each other. If you're a coral and you're stuck to a rock, you can't do that. So the best you can do is to throw your contribution and her contribution out into the water at the same time and hope that they meet in the water where the egg will be fertilized and then it will settle. To pull that off, it has to be incredibly synchronized. And as a result, they rely on things like the lunar cycle, but also the brightness of the moon at a certain point in the cycle as a trigger. And then all of the coral will release the sperm and eggs at the same time. They have found that coral exposed to Allen can release up to 3 days early. So they're out of sync with other coral in the area. So it's making it more unlikely that the eggs and sperm will meet at the opportune moment. So, thankfully I'm no longer dating anymore. But as you can imagine, if I was like trying to meet up with somebody and I'm like, hey, I'll meet you Saturday, and I show up there on a Thursday, the date wouldn't go very well. The same thing is happening with the coral. They're not getting the optimal opportunity to fertilize the eggs, and it's an additional threat to species that are already struggling from things like increased ocean temperatures and acidification. So light pollution is just one more problem that these poor coral have to deal with.
I really was like, where is he going with this one? Oh my God. That interesting analogy. I actually didn't realize that coral. I kind of in my head thought that coral was just around, I guess, in warmer waters. So I didn't think that we had coral here in Ireland. That's interesting.
Yeah, the ones we're most familiar with are the ones in the warmer waters, like particularly off the Great Barrier Reef. But basically, a coral is a colony of animals, and there's a huge diversity of them out there. Some are colorful, some are less colorful, and the ones that we have off the Irish coast, at least the ones that I'm aware of, are mostly kind of limestone colored, but they're still pretty cool and support a lot of cool life.
Well, that's very interesting. That's okay. So is there anything else that's affected here in Ireland, or is it mostly sea life?
Well, I think pretty much everything. I mean, if you think about it, like life has been around for 3.5 billion years, but like over the course of the Earth's history, it has dramatically changed the environment. Like there was a time when oxygen was toxic to most life on Earth, and then different types of bacteria emerged that started reducing oxygen as a byproduct, and that killed off all these other life, and these guys suddenly thrived, and like the actual composition of the atmosphere changed. Whereas things like the cycle of night and day have never really gone away. It's been the one constant that life has had to evolve alongside, really. So a lot of different species have evolved to use light as a trigger. I mentioned how we need melatonin to help us fall asleep, and we just wait for darkness as a trigger to help us produce that. Other species will, be able to dictate when they should be mating based on light cycles. Other factors as well, but the light will play a role in it. And one of the species that breaks my heart most often, but most people have probably heard of, is the example of turtles. When the turtles hatch, they need to see the reflection of like moonlight or starlight on the surface of the ocean to know where to head. And if they're emerge from their eggs on a beach close to an urban center, the brighter lights of the urban center are now attracting these hatchlings back towards the land rather than out to sea where they need to go. Things like nervous animals, certain species of amphibians, will only feed under like pure darkness so that they're harder to see. or they'll only sound for a mate under pure darkness. As that window of time gets smaller and smaller, it makes it harder and harder for them to mate successfully, or to eat enough food over the good summer months that they will be fat enough to invest energy in producing more eggs. So their clutch sizes are getting smaller year on year. So there's just all these really difficult to like quantify knock-on effects of light being where light doesn't need to be. And it's not a problem where the payoff of the light is so big that we're like struggling to get rid of it. It's not going to be a sacrifice to say, right, here's how we fix it. A lot of the problems that we're faced with are tricky because it's like you gotta stop living life the way you want to live life. But light pollution is actually just a matter of mitigating slightly in many cases. So it's not get rid of that light, it's shield that light. So make sure that the light is only shining downwards by putting a cap on it. And all of a sudden you've improved the scenario without losing the benefits that you as a person were getting from that light. So that's why, as much as you probably heard me being a negative guy over the course of 5-6 episodes, whatever it is now, I'm like, the world sucks, everything's terrible. This is one problem that I genuinely think we have a good chance of addressing in our lifetime.
That's a really good point for I think about the sea turtles, and it does. I think it was one of the David Attenborough, one of the recent series that he did. I don't know if it was Planet Earth or something, but he was describing the sea turtles coming out, hatching, and then it's turning away from the ocean, going into the towns because they were distracted by the streetlights. And then going across roads and getting squished. Oh, awful. But this is why I do astronomy, because I feel like biology is just so sad. Like, I can't handle that kind of stuff. No, to be honest, if I did see a car running over a telescope, I would be equally as upset. But it is, as well as protecting I was going to say Earth life on Earth. The putting a shield over these lights, especially the ones across the way from us, would really help out with astronomy as well, because then you don't have that light going up into the sky. So directing light is a great way to make it more efficient and not affect animals as well as astronomers, because when that goes up into the sky, it's doing absolutely nothing for us here on Earth. And it's just scattering around the atmosphere. So it makes it harder to see the stars, and then it's harder to do. It's not even, if I feel very, I don't know, I feel almost spoiled complaining about like not being able to use my big telescope. It's more like it's just regular people that enjoy the stars. They're not going to be able to see as many with light being scattered around in the atmosphere. And I was thinking about the woman from outside of Dublin that sent us that card. I think you were around for that. She sent a card in saying, I don't know if she said how old she was or what her age was, but she was saying that she was worried because when she was younger, she remembers seeing a lot more stars in the sky, and she's lived in the same house, I think it was. And then she's noticed that she doesn't see as many stars anymore, and she wanted to know why that was. And oh my God, it just broke my heart, because this is not somebody with a giant telescope going, oh, I can't see what I'm trying to look at. It's like, I'm just a woman that likes to look up at the sky at night, and I notice that it's changing. So even just for that simple fact, I think it's just kind of nice to think about, maybe we can do better with our lighting, make it more efficient, still keep people safe at night, but also make it so that we're not blowing out the night sky with all this extra light pollution.
I think we have a moral responsibility to do it. I mean, you talked about, how sad you would feel as a biologist or a zoologist, but like, I genuinely have a sense of sadness around the fact that people don't have access to the night sky. Because we hear all these stories about astronauts going up and looking down at the Earth and changing their whole perspective on life. But like, the whole point is that it makes them feel small. It makes them realize how insignificant they are. And you can do that from two sides of that particular viewpoint. And our colleague Niall is always saying that, like, that you don't need to go to space to feel small. You just need to see how big space is around you. Lie on the bonnet of your car and look up at the night sky, and you will feel small. But we're being deprived of that when it just looks like you've got this dome over your head, instead of seeing the full spectrum of the night sky that all of our ancestors had access to. And it's like there's a disconnect there, and like so many cultures have been shaped by the the shared night sky. I think we have a moral responsibility to protect it and then restore it to what it once was. Because there are other ways we can go even further than shielding. We don't need to have all the lights on all the time. You can turn them off. I want this done so that we can all share in the night sky, but also from a purely selfish perspective, I'm tired of being dazzled at night. Like I find it really, really difficult at the moment on roads, for instance. Like the intensity of lights seems to be increasing, and I don't seem to be the only person that's saying this. I'm hearing this from a lot of people that they're finding that they're getting dazzled on the roads more often. From a safety perspective, we need to be making more conscious decisions about the type of light we're using. I mentioned how I lived in St. Luke's Cross and that it was actually great. That I was in this little housing estate that had such tall Georgian houses that there was lots of shadows that I could work with, and it was actually okay for astronomy. But somebody installed this big bright spotlight about halfway through my time living there, and I felt really unsafe walking home once they did that because it was straight into my face, which meant all those shadows got so much darker and so much deeper. And from a health and safety perspective, the whole point of the light is that it's supposed to make it safer and easier to travel around at night, but too much of it can actually have the opposite effect, which is the height of irony.
Yeah. Actually, softer lighting is actually better at night than the blinding daytime kind of white light. And one thing that I do find, I find it very frustrating when there's a lot of light just shining straight out at you. And it is, I've been to a few cities where I thought, wow, this is really actually nice. And Budapest was one of them. They haven't really switched over to these really bright, I mean, this was a couple years now before the pandemic that I was over there. So I don't know if things have changed since then. But the last time I was over there, it was still that really soft kind of yellowy light at night. And it not only made it very like romantic, but it wasn't so blinding. And I was recently in, I think it was Spain. I was walking in Spain, in the south of Spain, and I couldn't get over how bright all the lights were, especially near the roads. It really felt like daytime walking along the roads. So I think I'm a little more sensitive to it working in this field, that when I do see light like that, I'm like, oh, come on, like this is not great. Because like you, I feel like everyone should have a chance to be able to see stars at night, kind of no matter where you're living. And I find it interesting that we've kind of come full circle, that the stars have now become so difficult to see in so many locations that it's now a money-making opportunity. And now we have astrotourism, where they're like, do you want to see stars? If you come on this trip with us, we'll take you out to where you can see the stars. It's like, this should be free. This really should be something you walk outside and look up and you can see the stars. So I just find that it's a very kind of, I don't know if Wall-E is the right, it's like that song where they're like, they put a tree in the tree museum or something.
Paved paradise and the parking lot.
That one. Yeah. It gives me that kind of vibe. But you know what? It's not all doom and gloom, because it is something that we are, it's one of those things where it's a new technology that came out with having all these LED lights and having be cheaper and more efficient and all of that. And then, now we can make them brighter. So it's one of those where we are experimenting as people and realizing that this isn't really the best option. And so it's not impossible to kind of mitigate what's happening. And as we're building more expanding cities and things, just being more aware of what the light can do as we expand, and just realizing that, like, I love the idea you said that we don't have to have them on all the time. I love the idea of like the lights that turn on when you like step underneath them and you're only being used as you're going, or even like roads and things. I've seen some really cool ideas for roads that are solar powered, and then they light up at night for safety. I think those kind of things are kind of cool. But that the lights are only triggered as you're driving, so it's through motion, and I don't know if it's weight or how they do it. But anyways, I'm not an engineer, but I think that's a really cool idea. But we do have things that we can see if you do get out to a dark sky location. And there are things in the city that are difficult. And you will notice a difference if you ever do. If you're somebody who's in the city all the time and you don't get a chance to get out, you're missing out on not just stars, but other things in the night sky. And have you had, now that you've gone from the city out to a dark sky location, have you noticed a difference between being here and being there?
Oh, I was going to say night and day, but that seems a bit too excessive. But it's absolutely, it is a little harder to find the planets now that I'm in a place where there's just many more objects I can confuse them with. But it's a price worth paying. That's just incredible. Really, really beautiful skies, and obviously the aurora, as I mentioned in the previous episode, and we'll continue to mention in every episode.
Rob,
absolutely stunning.
Is this like every episode you're just gonna get me upset? Is this what this is? Oh my gosh.
But again, like it's like what you said actually about the paving paradise and putting up a parking lot. Like I saw a fantastic infographic, and I'm so sorry to whoever the artist was. I don't recall what it was, but it was talking about species loss. And it was over the course of decades, and like how the oceans went from this teeming, beautiful thing at the start of the cartoon to this really bare thing with rubbish in it by the end of the cartoon. And current modern day conservationists are still trying to protect the bottom cartoon, you know, that teeming, that thing that's got rubbish in it, because our baseline is all we've ever known. So for a lot of us, we're living in dark sky or in areas that are so light polluted, we just can't conceive of what we're missing out on and what we should be protecting. So it's obscene to me. I think once you go and see a proper night sky, coming back into light pollution feels a bit like going to like Killarney National Park and seeing that somebody has dumped plastic all over it or something. Like the word pollution doesn't register to people because they associate it with dirt, and they're like, it's light, how can light be dirty? But when you realize the extent to which it is changing something beautiful and making it less beautiful, that's when you realize, oh, it really is pollution. It really is a bad, negative thing. And again, that is something that we should stress, is like, I think people assume anytime you're campaigning for something, you're outright against it. We're not against light. We're against excessive light where it doesn't belong. And that's all we've got to tackle is the excess. You know, nobody's coming to say you can't have your lights on at night if you don't feel safe, or, you know, street lights or, you know, car lights to help you navigate. It's just when the light is where it doesn't need to be, find ways to turn it off, reduce it. It's going to save us electricity. It's going to improve human health because they have found increased incidences of cancer within, you know, areas of really, really high light pollution. There's all sorts of diseases associated with disruptions to your sleep cycle. Like, it's just all around win-win-win. If you're not going to do it for us as astronomers, do it for yourself, do it for the turtles, do it so that your health is better, do it so you're squinting less at nighttime, and do it for poor old me who is tired of being blinded by these LEDs in cars. I'm just... Actually, yeah, let me know if you're also getting blinded by these LEDs. Is it just me, or am I just old now, or is this just an actual phenomenon?
Just thinking like squinting causes wrinkles. If you don't do it for us, do it for that. Think about how much younger you'll be if you don't have to squint at night. There's enough squinting during the day. No squinting at night. That's a great campaign. That should be a campaign slogan. Yeah, so I love getting out to a dark sky, and I try to do a trip out in the summertime when I can in Ireland, because we're very lucky here. We have 2 dark sky parks where if you are, literally anywhere in this country, because Ireland is quite small. So it doesn't take very long to get from one side to the other, which is one of my favorite things that Irish people complain about all the time. Like, oh my God, it's a 3-hour drive. I'm like, what? Americans do that as their commute to work in the morning. That 3-hour drive is nothing. And you don't have to go far to really get out. Well, in my opinion, it's not far away, but to get out to Kerry and to get to Mayo, we have 2 really nice dark sky parks with beautiful landscapes anyway, but also we're really fortunate where they're located. They're right on the west coast of Ireland, which means that they're farther away from the light pollution, because most of the light pollution in Ireland will be coming from Dublin, so it'll be more on the east side. Then Europe has a lot of light pollution in the larger cities. If you ever look at light pollution, or I guess not light pollution maps, I was going to say. They do have light pollution maps, but even their images from space of Europe, there's so much light. We have a lot of cities that are in really close proximity to each other. So we're lucky here in Ireland that we don't have these massive cities. We can get to dark sky locations fairly easily. Then next to those dark sky locations, you've got ocean, which means you're not going to have cities built on the other side of these dark sky parks. So we have a great opportunity to protect these dark sky areas and keep them dark. You're not too far away from either one of those. You're probably closer to Kerry, right?
Closer to Kerry, but Mayo wouldn't be too big a stretch. And there's also a new one added in Northern Ireland relatively recently. I actually don't know how to pronounce it. It's like OM. So I don't know, is that OM or is it like OM? Because it's the capital letter in the Sperrin Mountains. But that was added relatively recently. So on the island, you actually have even more options. And you don't actually need to go to the dark sky parks themselves. Like these are, outstandingly great skies and some of the best in the world. And we're not going to rattle on about them because we definitely have our friends at Dark Sky Island who will be able to do them much more justice, and we'll have them on in a future episode. But there are tons of places like West Cork. I know our former colleague Simon down in Dunmanway had really, really good access to night skies. A lot of the really great pictures that we have in our astrophotography exhibit, in the Dark Sky section, are from other areas in West Cork. Like if you get far enough away from a town and a city, the improvement is immense. It's just that little bit better in the dark sky parks. It's like going from a really good restaurant up to a Michelin star or something. It's that you're paying for that little bit of extra finesse, but you're not paying, it's free. But the extra bit of finesse does make it a more elite experience, and it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I'm mentioning the dark sky parks because they're great, but you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to go as far. So you don't have to even drive that far from Cork. If you start going west a little bit, you're going to start seeing better skies. And this time of year is great because if you do get out, yes, you do have to stay up a little bit late because the sun sets pretty late. But if you are out in the evening, probably around midnight, then you'll have the Milky Way overhead, which if you're coming from the city, you can't see in the city lights. You do have to be outside of Cork. But it's such an amazing thing that I take for granted because I grew up seeing the Milky Way, and just assuming that everyone has, that as a kid, I was used to seeing it overhead, in the fields in front of my cabin. But now I do appreciate it because I myself now have to go outside of the city, being in Cork and being able to go out to a dark sky location. I love being able to see the Milky Way again because it is, and you know what, actually, a lot of people don't even know what the Milky Way is. Sometimes I ask in planetarium shows and I said, I'll show the Milky Way. I said, do you know what this is? And I kind of get silence or I get nothing really. So when you're looking out, you're going to see a band through the night sky. So this is not a small object. You're going to get from the south. So if you're looking south, you'll be looking towards the core of the Milky Way, which is why summertime is a great time to go out and look because the core will be visible above the horizon. And that's where you have the most gas clouds and stars and everything there. So this glow of stars coming up over the horizon in the south, and then it'll stretch from south to the north. And it gets a bit fainter as it goes across the sky towards the north. What you're looking at is not only just a band of clouds and gas clouds and stars. This is the arm of our galaxy. So this is our Milky Way, our home galaxy. So I love to point out Andromeda in the night sky and say, there's our closest neighbor, the spiral galaxy, just like our own galaxy. And then say to people, do you know you can see your own galaxy? And a lot of people don't realize you can see your home galaxy. So that is it. We are in it. So we're not seeing a whole full spiral because we're in the spiral. We're looking from the outside or from the inside looking out, basically. Or if you're looking towards the core of the Milky Way, you're from the outside looking inside, I guess. Yeah, I have never really thought about it that way. But yeah, so anyways, you're looking at the spiral arm of the Milky Way stretching across our night sky, and you don't have to go out very far to see it. The trick is the weather. So if you want to go out and see the Milky Way, make sure you're checking the weather, and make sure you're looking at. It doesn't have to be a cloudless night, but a night where it's not going to be fully covered in cloud, because, like I said, the Milky Way is a big object. You're going to be able to see. It's weird saying object. It's a big streak. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a big thing in the night sky. Now, so that's just one thing you can see if you get outside of the city. If you get into darker areas, technically you can see our neighbor, the Andromeda galaxy, in the night sky. It's faint, so this is why you're not going to be able to see it in the city, but it's bright enough that if you do get to a dark sky area, you can see it with your own eye. So I think that's kind of cool to be able to see it without having any sort of equipment. Like, if you don't have a telescope, though, and if you want to try to see something in the night sky, I've kind of mentioned this before, if you've got a pair of binoculars around, and they're a bit tricky to use because you have to be real steady when you're using them. So I've propped them against like a fence post and used them to look through. Or if you have a tripod to set them on, that just makes it a little bit easier in the night sky. But it's a good way to start off if you want to try to look at some fainter objects in the night sky. And we have planets that are going to be visible coming up in the next while. So now's a good time to get out if you get some clear skies. See if you can take a drive, take a spin down to a darker area, get out of the city, and just try to look up. That's all it is.
And we'd advise you to eat carrots, but I had that myth busted on me today while doing my research. Really fun story, actually. Turns out, the whole idea that carrots give you excellent night vision?
I know. I thought it was just...
You never heard that?
I've heard, like, have carrots to help your vision, but not specifically night vision.
But it doesn't do either. It's so they say that carrots are good for your eyes, and they are, but they're not good at improving your vision. But the idea that they improve your vision and your night vision in particular is actually a holdover from World War II propaganda from the British government. So what happened was they developed radar, and that they could use on board the airplanes to shoot down German planes at night, and to not let the Germans know that this was this technology that they had. They basically released propaganda suggesting that they were just feeding their fighter pilots bucket loads of carrots, and that the carrots were leading to this improved visual acuity at nighttime. And that myth has persisted to this day, with people still thinking, if I eat carrots, it will improve my night vision. Carrots are good for your eyes, but they're not going to make you see in the dark.
I do kind of remember hearing that now, but no, I didn't. I don't remember it being night vision. Well, that's upsetting because, no, I was going to say, because I was going to buy a bunch of carrots, but no, I'm not. But speaking of night vision, if you are going out, it is something to remember. Try to keep your eyes away from any sort of light, whether it's cars or street lights or anything like that, and even your phones. If you have, most phones now have a blue light filter on them, or I think a lot of the Samsungs call them like eye shield protection or eye protection or something like that you can switch on. So definitely switch that on so that when you're going out, that you can use your phone and things without disturbing your eyes. You want to have that night vision, and it is important to remember it takes about 20 minutes for your full night vision to come into effect. So if you want to try to see some fainter objects and you really want to get out and see a really nice sky full of stars, you want to be sitting in dark away from lights for about 20 minutes to fully get your full night vision in. And you will notice a difference. You will notice that as you're sitting out, when you first get away from the lights, you'll be able to see a lot of stars. But then as you're sitting there, you'll start to see more objects, more stars as you're sitting in the dark. So just something to keep in mind as the summer months roll on, and hopefully it's such bad June and July so far. I'm hoping that means we'll have a nice August and a nice September, which will be lovely for going out and stargazing.
Yes, tell us if you've ever seen the Milky Way. What your personal experiences might be with light pollution. Have you got an annoying light that shines through your window every night that you want to know what you can do to get rid of? I think everybody has some kind of story where a light has driven them crazy at some point or another. So tell us why you would like to tackle light pollution for your own selfish reasons.
I'm wondering if everyone does have a story or if this is just your thing that you're really upset about this one light.
Well, basically I want people to reassure me that I'm not just overly hung up on this one thing and that I'm like some freak outlier.
I will say, I do remember a few years ago, I was living on the edge of the water, and across the water was a park, which was nice because it was dark at night. And then the city I was living in at the time decided to put in a light post in the middle of that park. And in front of the park, there was like an area where people could, or I say at the front of the park, along the edge of the water, there was an open area where people could sit at the edge of the water and everything. So that's where they put the light. But that was across from me. So not only was I getting this light blaring through my own windows, it was also reflecting off the water as it was coming in too. So it was very, very annoying, and had to upgrade my curtains because of it. It was that bad. Very obnoxious. So there you go, Rob. I hope that makes you feel better. I think you're crazy, but I don't think you're that crazy.
I'm willing to bet that at least one other person out there has experienced this with at least Christmas lights. Because I remember waking up in the middle of the night going, why are the cops outside? Because I'd forgotten that there was like a blue and a red Christmas light intermixed, like flicking on and off just outside the window. It was a race every night to fall asleep before they were turned on.
I don't understand who is manufacturing Christmas lights and says, oh, do you know what? This setting where they're blinking like crazy is what everybody needs. It is the most obnoxious thing. And I cannot, aside from being in astronomy and light pollution, and aside from all of that, why? I find it irritating. I think the nicest setting ever is the soft twinkle. Lovely. Flashing? Never, ever, ever, ever have I thought, oh, you know what that Christmas tree needs? Blasting lights. No. Ridiculous. Get rid of it. I would sign any petition to get rid of every single light doing that. And I cannot stand it when people put them on the outside of their house and they're on balconies and everything else. Oh my gosh. Anyways, don't get me started. You already did get me started. But every Christmas, there's always that one person in the neighborhood that has a flashing light. Why? Okay. Now that's really upset me. So I'm going to go away and have a glass of wine or something. I don't know. Anyways, we would love it if everyone gets fully inspired by this episode and gets out into the night sky and takes advantage of this bit of sunshine we're having, and hopefully you get to see your first time seeing the Milky Way, or if you get to see something cool, like if you do spot Andromeda, let us know. If you want some help trying to find Andromeda in the night sky, or maybe even trying to figure out where you're looking to, if you haven't seen the Milky Way, maybe you don't know what you're looking at, let us know. You can find us across social media, all different platforms. You can just search Black Rock Castle Observatory and find us there. Send us a comment. You can put it in the comment section down below, or questions, general space questions. Go for it. We love those too. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.